in 1975. So Prabhupada did first initiation, fire sacrifice, and kirtan after the morning program. And I was playing mridanga every time a new disciple came up for first initiation. Everybody goes, Hari Bol, you know. So one of the last devotees, so the system was Brahmananda Swami was handing Prabhupada the beads, and there was a piece of paper attached to the beads with the devotee's new name. So this one devotee came up, and I could hear, because Prabhupada's microphone was very loud, and I could hear Brahmananda say, Nirashraya. And as soon as Brahmananda said Nirashraya, Prabhupada said, what? No, your name will be Bhagavat Ashray. Because it appeared that somebody was trying to play a trick on Prabhupada, because at that time he was allowing some of his assistants to pick the names. So it was sort of like a test. And Prabhupada caught it right away. No, your name will be Bhagavat Ashray, like this. And the whole temple just went into ecstasy. So Prabhupada, you couldn't play a joke on him. He knew what he was doing. Very good. Thank you.
Haribo. Rudra Vapu, have you a story to share with us? Rudra? Vapu? Nothing? You want to say a poem? Okay, he's going to say a poem.
Calcutta City never looked so pretty as that day in 1896. Soft September skies and cool gas lights, horse-drawn hackneys traveled quick. In a mud-walled shack beneath a leaning jackfruit tree, you took your birth. No common boy just to play with toys. One astrologer saw your worth. At 70, he'll cross the sea excuse me, and plant upon a barren soil the seed of bhakti, so Krishna Shakti would inundate the world. Inundate the world. Srila Prabhupada, we didn't know you. When would you come at last? In Maya's clutches, without so much as a prayer from our darkened past. You shone the light, took away the night, and neatly rearranged us. Hellbound dogs turned devotee cogs when you changed us. You kindly changed us. New York City never seemed so gritty as that fall of 1965. Tawdry bars honking motor cars, billboard lures spawned the city's drive. Derelicts slept across tenement steps amid stores geared to passion's way. Trapped in our shell of this homemade hell, we Westerners looked out at gray. Yeah, we looked out at gray. Srila Prabhupada, we needed you. When would you come at last? In Maya's clutches, without so much as a promise from our darkened past. Misery drew its curtain, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever change us. Stubborn to the core at fantasy's door, then you changed us. You somehow changed us. I think I'll just leave it at that because the third verse.
Let's give him a round of applause. That's a great poem. Spiritual activity in the spiritual world is poetry. So why don't we just begin, and the sound vibration will draw them in, because we have a speaker outside. Is that okay with you, Manglananda? To begin? And then the Dugdapan, Dhananjaya Pandit, the speaker is outside, functional? Great. All right. Again, Manglananda Prabhu. Let's give him a round of applause, his introduction here. Fantastic.
Test 1, 2. Okay. I have a story too. My story is I was just walking outside. This is 1970, maybe 77. And a devotee said to me, "Hey, they're upstairs with Prabhupada listening to your Hare Krishna Festival album." So I said, "Oh," so I went up there and walked in, and Prabhupada's sitting there, and then I just sat down on the floor with these other devotees. And they played, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this album, but it just has, I'm singing some Vaishnav songs with guitar, And part of it was did like a marching band kind of a thing. Hare Krishna, with a marching band. And then later, Dave, who's our God brother in San Francisco? Anyways, he asked me to write an arrangement for the marching band, because he got the 49ers band to play in the Rath Yatra parade, So we did that, but we were upstairs, and they played that particular cut, and the horns are playing and the whole thing. And then when it was done, Prabhupada said, there should be a diorama, like a big circle, and Lord Chaitanya is in the front of a kirtan party with Nityananda, and this will go around while this is playing. And Jagai and Madai will be here, and every time Lord Chaitanya comes by, they will fall flat and offer obeisances. So that was his idea for a diorama. And Bhardraj was sitting there. He says, "You can do this?" And he said, "Yes, Prabhupada." But it never happened, but it was a nice thing that Prabhupada wanted. So maybe someday they'll put that. It's not too late, that's right. Okay, this is a song that I wrote called "It's All About You." Hippies made folks nervous, but we were gypsies with a purpose. We refused to scratch the belly of the beast. We vowed to right the wrong, there was conviction in our songs. I believe we were on the road to love and peace. But the best laid plans of my Sandman were shattered once again, 'cause this old world don't spin on a blind man's point of view. It ain't about me, it's all about You're the reason false is false and true is true. You're the reason red is red and blue is blue. It don't matter what I thought I knew. It ain't about me, it's all about Seems like the greatest resistance in our struggle for existence comes when darkness steals away our inspiration. It's a young man's demise when the fire leaves his eyes, and it seems his dreams are just hallucinations. I've seen folks in that darkest of places. I turned away from the hurt in their faces. There are things that a man cannot undo, but this ain't about me, it's all about you. You're the reason false is false and true is true. You're the reason red is red and blue is blue. I could never make an old heart new, but this ain't about me, it's all about you. You're the reason false is false and true is true. You're the reason red is red and blue is blue. Slowly it's all coming into view. Can't believe I didn't have a clue. It ain't about me, it's all about you. It ain't about me, it's all about you. Thank you. Okay, this is a song from the Trying to Connect album. In a sense, I feel like I just did that album, but it was 2002. So it was a few years ago. This is The Love I Lost. This darkness is flooded with lies. Please open my eyes. I stumble through another day. Can't let another lifetime slip away. Your kindness is hard to believe. What madness drove me to leave? Here with just myself to blame, alone and lost, I'm calling out your name. Start. Countless lifetimes we've been apart, but your love remains forever sweet. Please take me back, I'll wait here at your feet. This captured soul has no say. Lord, rescue me at any cost. This dream world isn't worth the love I lost. Oh, Govinda, Hare Krishna. Oh, Gopala, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, you know the melody now. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right.
Haribo.
Thank you.
Before you start the next song, everybody in the back, there are seats in the front row. We won't charge you any extra for this. Come on up. Come on down.
Come on down.
Fill up the spaces. Fill up the spaces before the next song comes along. Nice Shakti.
It was once said that Prabhupada built a house that the whole world can live in. So this is a song I wrote called Room in This House. There's room in this house. There is room in this house. There's room in this house for everyone to serve the Lord. An act of love, great or small, is something we can all afford. Now don't stand there in the doorway. You've been traveling so far. Are you waiting till you're perfect? Come on in as you are. There is room in this house. Oh, the darkness creeps up on us in very subtle shades of gray, till the thunder and the lightning is all we have to find our way. I thank God for those who guide us through the pouring rain and invite us to take shelter of His holy name. There is room in this house. Well, you might have gone to Yale, got yourself a big degree, or you might have gone to jail and they just threw away the key. but the Lord's only looking for sincerity. There's room in this house. There's room. Okay, this is the gospel part of it. You have to repeat after me. There is room in this house for everyone to serve the Lord. You don't have to repeat that part. An act of love, great or small, is something we can all afford. Don't stand there in the doorway. You've been traveling so far. Are you waiting till you're perfect? Come on in as you are. Maya tries to tell us all the vacancies are filled. If you're not a saint by now, you won't ever do his will. But don't you let her try to keep you out. There is room in this house. There is room. Thank you. Yes, Jai Prabhupada. I'm going to bring my good friend who has worked with me for a long time, Sachinandana. He's going to play a little guitar. Let's hear it for him. Test 1, 2. This is our big number. 2 guitars in this song. What about that? Okay, this is definitely a sing-along song if you'd like. This is O Govinda. The sun's effulgence hide your face. Your blissful form lies far beyond my eyes. Now your wonders call my heart's embrace. As dawn displays your beauty in the skies. The rainbow reveals the way you dress. Movements of the moon reflect your mind. Your smiling is the cause of happiness, and love exists because you are so kind. Oh Govinda, in my heart, celestial herdsman, lotus-eyed one. Your precious gift of love and God. You stand behind the sun. You're the one. You're the one. In my heart. In my heart. Rolling rivers flow forth from your veins. Clouds that fill the sky your hair. The seeds of life are watered by your rains, and from your breathing blows the mighty air. My Lord, you are the source of all I see. Your movements are the passing days of time. You are the resting place of all that be, and love exists because you are so kind. Oh, Govinda, within my heart, celestial herdsman, loaded side one. Your precious gift of love in blood, you who stand behind the sun. You're the one. You're the one in my heart. Beautiful. In my heart. Oh, Govinda, within my heart, celestial herdsman, lonely side one. Your precious gift of love embodied. Oh, you stand behind the sun. Oh, you stand behind the sun. You're the one. You're the one. In my heart. In my heart. In my heart. Satyanandana, help me out there. Thank you. Well, I travel, I have a little RV, and I travel around playing different places, a lot of times in RV parks and other open mics and acoustic venues. And I have, several more secular kinds of songs that I've written. So usually in that environment, I'll do some of those. They have a spiritual side, but they're not as obvious. And then I do this song, which is More Than Just One Way to Pray, which always seems to be received well. So I thought I'd play it for you guys. You can place my body in an old pine box, put my Chevy upon blocks. You can lay me down in a shallow grave, don't matter, mama, 'cause I've been saved. And I don't worry none what people say. It's more than just one way to pray. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When the banker man comes and takes my boat, there won't be much left in the will I wrote. Every cent was spent on the bills I paid. Let death come a knocking, I'm not afraid. I don't worry none what people say. There's more than just one way to pray. Pray with me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I don't worry none what people say. There's more than just one way to pray. I praise the Lord every day. I just sing His name in a different way. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Haribo. Yeah, you good?
That's it for me.
All right, very good. All glories to Mangalananda Prabhu.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great honor to sing for you. It's nice to sing for people that love Krishna.
So,
My publicist said we have
Hold on, I know, I'm doing that right now.
Okay.
Before he steps off the stage, Mangalananda Prabhu has very ingeniously brought some CDs with him. He also has a website. Anyone can purchase material? And there's written out there. So tell everybody over the internet also, please, where is the website? What is the website?
The website is averagesoul.net. Yes, okay. Yeah, I forgot that I was playing for people on the internet. All right.
Anyway,
Hare Krishna.
We will all go on there and purchase. How many CDs do you have available? 9 available, but on the website? More. More is good. All right. Again, all glories to Mangalananda Prabhu. A round of applause. Now next we have Svarup Prabhu is going to join us. He's going to be speaking again on the asana. So again, little house house cleaning we need to do here. Everybody take your chairs and turn them around and face the asana. Those in the front, move the chairs back a little bit so we have a little bit room at the top there. Yeah, have to. Yeah. Been there, but done that. That's too much. So after. All right, everybody find a seat, please. Settle down. Yeah.
This is channel 3, extra.
All right, Svarupa is going to give us some more Prabhupada nectar. His realizations, some lessons he learned, and qualities. He's learned something over the years. Got to. Otherwise, I hired the wrong guy, but I don't think so. So, again, Svarupa Prabhu, long time, big time devotee, servant of Srila Prabhupada, dear God brother.
Hare Krishna.
So before we get started, let's give him a round of applause. Make him welcome.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Is this on? Yeah. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksaramilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. What I'd like to do, start off this afternoon, I want to read something that I wrote a few years ago. I posted it on Facebook, then it got picked up by Dhanavats. I wrote it actually for, how do you get this up here? Can you tighten it? It was better last time. Get it up near my mouth. Is that good? Better. Okay. This is called A Hard Sell. Ready? At a time when the Vietnam War was raging on and the peace movement was growing, Srila Prabhupada arrived in America and presented Bhagavad Gita as it is, a scripture in which Krishna chastises Arjuna for being a pacifist and tells him to get onto the battlefield and kill. At the height of the civil rights movement, and a time when feminism was on the rise, Srila Prabhupada came to teach that spiritually we're all equal, but on the bodily platform it just isn't so. When an entire generation was turning into hedonists in slogans like, if it feels good, do it, and turn on, tune in, drop out, and the battle cry was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, Srila Prabhupada introduced Bhakti Yoga, a discipline that requires followers to give up illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. When growing long hair was so in that the musical Hair became a nationwide sensation, Srila Prabhupada instructed his male followers to shave their heads as a show of submission and asked his female followers to cover their heads as a show of chastity. When other swamis, yogis, and gurus were coming from India to the West, preaching peace and love, and we are all one, Srila Prabhupada called them cheaters, rascals, and crows. When the feel-good book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, came out, we showed him a copy. Srila Prabhupada remarked, we say that we are okay, but you are not okay. To say the least, Srila Prabhupada's message was a hard sell given the time, place, and circumstances. He was even told that if he tried to impose such rules and regulations onto Westerners, nobody would listen. No one would take him seriously, and we would say to him, go back to India, sir. Srila Prabhupada saw through all the superficiality, and he saw that we were dissatisfied. He observed a generation of young people who were unhappy and wanted change. All the experimenting with communes, drugs, and sex, and all the protesting and rebelling was due to deep feelings of frustration and hopelessness. He told us that we were intelligent, to want something better, to want happiness and peace, but we didn't know how to achieve it. He told us that he came to give us the positive alternative. He gave us the peace formula and taught us about real love. Never did he compromise. Surely he was innovative and creative. and made some adjustments to accommodate for time and the place and circumstance. But he never deviated from his strict adherence to the Gaudiya Vaishnava teachings he heard from his spiritual master. He didn't have to. Srila Prabhupada's genuine purity, compassion, and love was the force behind the message, and which attracted all of us to him like iron filings to a magnet. We gladly let him turn us hippies into happies with, as he would describe, shining faces. Yes, Srila Prabhupada's message was a hard sell, and he came alone, almost 70 years of age, to a strange, hostile environment to distribute it, as ordered by his Guru Maharaj. Against all odds, he captured our hearts and minds and made the holy name of Krishna and the Maha Mantra known throughout the entire world. So, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Anyway, I thought that was a decent piece of writing. So let me tell you this one story. It's a good story about New York Rath Yatra. Was anyone here there, the first Rath Yatra? When was it? 76, that's right. Okay, so I got to drive Srila Prabhupada from the West 55th Street Temple to the parade, which was already in progress. And we rented a really, really nice Lincoln Continental, blue with a black Landau top. You remember that car? And so Tamal asked me to drive him because I had some experience. I used to be a New York cab driver for about a year or two when we lived in Brooklyn, near the Brooklyn Temple on Henry Street. I took off about a year, and I had just become a householder, and I thought, well, householders are supposed to have a job, so I drove a cab for a year. So I knew the streets of Manhattan inside and out. So I got to drive Srila Prabhupada, and on the way, well, you see, the parade was going down Fifth Avenue, so it was in progress, like I say. So I had to somehow or other meet up with Subhadra's cart, where he was going to get up on, and then the parade was going to stop. So I was going down parallel on 7th Avenue, because avenues go up and down. So I kept looking down the side streets to see where the cart was. And anyway, it was a logistical nightmare, but we did it. On the way to the parade, Srila Prabhupada, let me see, who was in the car? Okay, I was driving, Tamal, Brahmananda, Kirtanananda, and I think Jai Tirtha. And was Rameshwar in there? No, he wasn't. No, it was Tamal, Kirtanananda. Anyway, so Srila Prabhupada was in the back seat, and I was looking at him through the rearview mirror, watching him, and he asked what the program was. So it was explained to him that he was going to ride with the festival, with the parade. We were going to go down to Washington Square Park, where we had reserved the park, and there was a big pandal, and thousands of people were going to be waiting for him, and he was going to be on the stage giving an address. And Prabhupada heard that, and he was quiet for a while, and then he began to reminisce. He said, yes, when I first started chanting at Tompkins Square Park, the police would come often and make me move. They would say I was disturbing the peace, and they would stop me. They were always giving me trouble, the police. And then I think it was Kirtananda said, well, Srila Prabhupada, today the park is not only ours, but the police will be there, but to protect us, to make sure that no one disturbs our festival. And so I think it was then Brahmananda said, Srila Prabhupada, I think today we can say that you've conquered New York. And then I chimed in, I said, and Prabhupada, when you've conquered New York, you've conquered the world. And Prabhupada said, yes, that was my thinking from the start, that I'll come to New York. He actually said that he was thinking at first to go to London first. But then he thought, no, New York is the most important city in the world. This is the most important mission, and I shall go to New York. Thank goodness he did. So I also want to mention something that it's topical. What's going on in the news these days, especially this issue about abortion. I wanted to mention what Prabhupada said about this. So one godbrother, Tusta Krishna, his idea was to make some propaganda about being vegetarianism, about abortion, write articles in BTG, and push these ideas. Prabhupada wrote back to him and said no. He wanted to put these grotesque pictures of cows being slaughtered. Prabhupada said, no, we will have no such thing. He said, we are not vegetarian. We are not after vegetarian. We're after Krishna Prasadam. We're not a vegetarian movement. That's not our purpose. And as far as abortion goes, Prabhupada wrote in this letter, he said, yes, we say abortion is bad, but we do not get involved in the politics and politicians about this abortion issue. So there it is. You know, we shouldn't disturb ourselves with these issues. You know, someone just asked me before, this afternoon, we were taking prasadam. He asked me, he said, what did Prabhupada think about politics? And I remembered this one incident that kind of tells the whole story. Again, 1976, Prabhupada comes to New York for the first New York Rath Yatra. Now, that summer of 76, it just so happened that the Democrats were having their convention in Madison Square Garden, and they had nominated Jimmy Carter to be their candidate. So when Prabhupada landed, and the reporters were asking him all kinds of questions, and of course, that was the big buzz all over the nation, especially headlines in New York. This guy came out of nowhere from Atlanta, governor of Georgia, peanut farmer, Jimmy Carter, big deal. So someone asked Prabhupada, so Swami, what do you think of this Jimmy Carter? And Prabhupada said, I do not know who is this Jimmy Carter. And, you know, at that moment, I was just so proud that this is my spiritual master. He's not going to give, this is mundane nonsense. Do you have any idea what level Srila Prabhupada is on? You're asking him this foolish question, what he thinks of this Jimmy Carter. I just love the fact that Prabhupada said, I don't know who is this Jimmy Carter. I am not familiar with him. So, you know, next question. So here's, on a serious note, I want to tell about a time when my sister, a lot of you might know, my sister's name is Manmohini. She's a very nice devotee. She joined a couple of months after I joined the movement. Actually, when I joined in New York and then she came, there was no facility for women in the New York ashram, so we sent her up to Boston. And then I came up about a couple of months later to join her to work on ISKCON Press. Anyway, my sister got married, had a baby daughter. Her husband, I won't go into details, he met an untimely death. He was killed by a jealous husband. It was a scandal, it was a mess. But in the aftermath, Manmohini wanted to know what she should do. She had questions. Can she ever get remarried? What to do now? She was 23 years old. She was suddenly a widow. And that had never happened in ISKCON. It was something. So Prabhupada was here in LA when it all came down. We went up to meet with Srila Prabhupada, have a private discussion with him. Unfortunately, it wasn't being recorded. A lot of things were discussed during that. But so I tried to remember as much as I could of that conversation. But one thing that, another thing was, Shruti Kirti was his personal servant at the time, and when Shruti Kirti brought us into the room upstairs here, Shruti Kirti started walking out of the room, and Prabhupada said, no, I want you to stay here and sit down, because Shruti Kirti wanted to get married. He's asking Prabhupada, no, I want to get married and leave this personal service. Prabhupada said, no, I want you to hear this. And let me digress for a minute also, as far as being personal servant. I'm going on a sideline here. In February of 1970, Purushottam was Prabhupada's personal servant. He left the movement. He had problems accepting Prabhupada saying we didn't go to the moon. You know, that happened in the summer of 69. So finally, in February 70, he just couldn't wrap his mind around that. So he left for whatever reason. So I was in Boston working on the press. I was still Brahmananda's secretary. Prabhupada called Brahmananda and said, you need to send someone, you need to find a personal servant, you know, to take Purushottam's place and send them immediately here. So Brahmananda said to me, he said, look, you're my secretary, you're working on the books, you're typesetting, but Prabhupada needs a personal servant, and as much as I like, you know, you working with me, I think you'd be a good match for that. And, you know, I was kind of taken aback. I didn't know what to think. And Brahmananda saw the look on my face. He said, you don't have to answer me right now. Sleep on it. Give me an answer tomorrow morning. I did not sleep that night. That was a very heavy decision to make. The next morning, I went to Brahmananda. I said, Brahmananda, can I not be Prabhupada's personal servant? I really love working on the books, and I like what I'm doing, you know. And I was afraid to become that intimately connected with Srila Prabhupada. I didn't trust my own ego. I thought to myself, the first time he chastises me, I'm going to be out the door. You know, I just wanted to serve Prabhupada, you know, in absentia, so to speak. Anyway, so Prabhupada was talking with my sister and me. Now, here's the connection where my sister's husband, Srilam, was once Prabhupada's personal servant in 1968 here in LA when the temple was on La Cienega. So Prabhupada was like eulogizing him, like talking affectionately about Srilam. He said, so he was my personal servant, just like Sri Kirti. He was massaging, he was cooking, he was driving me. Then he asked me to get married. I told him, no, I think you're a little too young, you should wait. He insisted, and then I let him. And then he went crazy. That's what he said. He went crazy. He ended up running off with someone else's wife, and so that's what happened. Adultery, affair. But then Prabhupada was saying that, Prabhupada leaned back and he was meditating on it. He said, so as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one who takes up this path but falls away, he's given another opportunity to again make progress in spiritual life. You take your next birth and you pick up where you're left off. When Arjuna asks Krishna what happens to one who falls away due to worldly mindedness, is he have no position in any sphere like a rent cloud? And Krishna says, one who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. It's all in the 6th chapter, I think. And he says, that he'll again be given, he said, a chance to take birth in a family of Brahmins or aristocratic, wealthy family. Probably use the word big family, to where it'll be more easy for him to pick up in spiritual life. So here's the deal. Prabhupada then leaned back and he said, but he had the opportunity in this life, and now he has to take another birth. So what is the use? And that struck me like a thunderbolt. What is the use? So on the one hand, Prabhupada's saying, no, it's all right, you fall away, you take your next birth. But to have the opportunity that we have in this life and then to blow it, to not use this opportunity to go back to Godhead, that's monumental stupidity. I mean, we have the opportunity. Prabhupada, it's like Prabhupada cares more about what our future is than we do. We don't realize the immensity of having to take another birth when we had the chance to get out of this material world this time around. So that was on a serious note. But let me see. I want to talk about the time in 1974. It was supposed to be the grand opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir, but it didn't happen. Prabhupada came and he saw nothing was ready. It was called off. The grand opening was called. Then I think it finally did have the grand opening the next year. Lord Ramachandra's appearance day, I think it was in April of 75. Can anyone verify that? Is that when the Krishna Balaram Temple had the grand opening? But anyway, I wanted to go to the original one, and I had already flown from LA to New York, and I was about to get on the plane when I heard that it was canceled. So, well, look, it was canceled, but I'm still going. I want to go to Vrindavan. So I did end up going to Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada was there. And the fact that the festival was called off is kind of nice because hardly anybody was there. So I got a lot of intimate time with Srila Prabhupada. And Palika, I don't know if anyone remembers Palika, she was cooking for Prabhupada at the time. And one morning, one of the first mornings that I was there, she came out of the kitchen and she had a garland. She said, Sru, go give this garland to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was sitting in his room with a bunch of people old friends from Vrindavan that he knew. And he was sitting and talking with them. And I garlanded Prabhupada and I started walking out of the room. Prabhupada said, no, you sit down. And so I sat down, and that was repeated every day for about a week. I would go in, I would take the garland from Palika, garland Prabhupada, and then sit down and watch him interact with all these old friends of his from Vrindavan, people that he had known for a long, long time. And it was very, very nice to see how Prabhupada was so relaxed, talking with... Now, they gave him due respect. Prabhupada was sitting behind the desk, but they were joking. A lot of it was in Hindi. I didn't, once in a while they would joke together and Prabhupada would laugh, and then Prabhupada would get serious and quote some Sanskrit verse. I could tell he went into, philosophy, and they would all listen. But to see Prabhupada interacting with old friends in Vrindavan was very curious, very nice to see him in that, because I'd never seen him in that kind of situation. Yeah, I'd always seen him with the disciples and everybody, running after his car and Prabhupada and yelling, These were it was, subdued. And Prabhupada was very relaxed, sitting back and talking with old friends. On one of the morning walks, It was very hot. It was summertime. In fact, I heard the temperature these days in Vrindavan, it's been over 110 degrees every day. The other day I sent I forwarded some money to Gargamuni in the Western Union. I said, and it wasn't picked up for 48 hours. I said, Gargamuni, why don't you go get it? He said, you don't know, it's 113 degrees every day. So couldn't you send a Mad Dog or an Englishman out to go pick it up? So anyway, it was very, very hot. We were on a morning walk, and the flies, the Vrindavan flies, if any of you ever experienced Vrindavan in the summertime, those flies just dive bomb you. They just come in swarms. And it was just annoying the heck out of me. And finally, I just burst out and said, Prabhupada, are there flies in the spiritual world? And Prabhupada chuckled and said, yes, but they're not bothersome like these flies. And when they buzz Hare Krishna. So as I said, I work with ISKCON Press, and I was typesetting. We didn't call it typesetting. We had a composing machine. And when I got there in January of 1970, we were working on Krishna book. And I remember thinking to myself, we worked the night shift. I was working double shift, actually, 16 hours a day. And Prabhupada wanted the manuscript, the camera-ready copy, to be done by February. And there was just no way. If we finally got it done by June of 1970, and that's when Brahmananda took the manuscript, the camera-ready copy to Japan, Dynapan. We finally did print Krishna book. But I remember working on it, chapter after chapter, all the Krishna killing the demons. We had never heard these stories before. I mean, Prabhupada would like make mention, Mother just said, we had little ideas, but we never heard the pastimes like this. And I remember thinking to myself, now, when I first joined, the only books that we had was the abridged Gita, TLC had just come out, and the original 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam that Prabhupada brought from India. And I remember reading in the preface of the Srimad Bhagavatam that one should not go to the 10th canto, one should not read the 10th canto, the pastimes, without first going through the first 9. So I'm wondering, why is the very first thing that Prabhupada wants published the summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? But then, I had the realization that Srila Prabhupada, and also at the time, Prabhupada introduced the prayer, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharna Nirvishesha Sunyavadi, that he came to, defeat voidism and impersonalism. The Sunyavadi, the Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pachaya Deshatarni, the Western countries from voidism and impersonalism. And this weapon, Krishna book was a weapon against impersonalism, because he's teaching love of God, but how can you love someone you know nothing about? So he wanted us to know, who is Krishna? His pastime, what does he look like? What were his pastimes? So he wanted everyone to fall in love with Krishna book. And he wrote it in such a way where it's impossible to mistake these to be ordinary activities. He goes over and over. If you read Krishna book, he constantly is reminding the reader that these are not these conjugal relationships between Krishna, Radharani, and Krishna. They're not like the relationships in the material world. And Krishna's killing all these demons. And so in that way, Prabhupada introduced us to Krishna. And as I also said before, I was getting letters from people all over the world. And when Krishna book came out, so many people came to the movement after reading Krishna book. They said, I got this hard volume of Krishna book on the street, and it was the first big book that was distributed. I think up in San Francisco, Balavanta and Keshava, they were like experimenting with it, because before that, people would go out on the street with Back to Godhead and Spiritual Sky Incense. That was about it, but there was no big book distribution. And Krishna book, remember those first 2 big gray, so they were being distributed. And so many people was there. I read this Krishna book and had that forward from George Harrison, and so many people became devotees. I mean, Krishna says in the Gita, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities. So Krishna book gave us an understanding of his appearance and activities. So that was such an important book, and I felt so fortunate to be privy, one of the first people to read about these pastimes. And we had to type it twice. There was no such thing as desktop publishing word processors. I'm talking 1969, 70. So we had this composing machine, and to get the margins flushed on the right side, we had to type a rough copy and then a final copy. We'd put these. It was like a digital thing that you would have to put a color and a number combination so the words would be spread apart to get a justified right margin. Anyway, for every time I came to the word Krishna or something with diacritic marks, I had to take the font out, change the fonts, typing fonts, or from bold to italic. It was a very, tedious process. But, we had to type the rough copy, final copy, and I felt very fortunate to be typing Krishna book like that. We were also working on Nectar Devotion, the chapters of the second canto, these 10 chapters. Do you remember the books we came out with? The First Step in God Realization, Lord in the Heart. So there was a lot going on with ISKCON Press at the time. And I felt very fortunate working on the press back then. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to... Oh, we were talking before about another thing that's topical. On one morning walk on Cheviot Hills, I remember this very well, Prabhupada started talking about how capitalism and communism both wanted to have world domination. He just started talking about this. And he said, of the two, the communists are strong, they're gaining strength, while, in the capitalism here in America, becoming lazy. He said, so of the two, the communism is atheism. It's the biggest danger for Krishna consciousness. They're atheists. But at least here in the United States, under the capitalism, we're allowed to have our Sankirtan movement. So he said it's very important that America can stand up to this communism idea of wanting world domination. So he said, so on your dollar bill it says, "In God we trust." So therefore our mission is to teach everyone who is God and how to trust in God. But he also said there will be a war. There will be a nuclear war at some point. And he said 60% of the world population will perish. And then he said, after that, preaching will be good. So these, Prabhupada never said he was like some kind of prophet, because we started like peppering him with a lot of questions, like, what about China? What part will they play? And then Prabhupada just kind of like changed the subject. Like he said, I'm not a politician. I don't, but he did make these predictions. And even though, we saw the so-called fall of communism, it's come back, it's like a cancer that goes into remission and comes back 10 times stronger later. So we're seeing that right now. Communism, capitalism, who knows? There's so many short fuses in the world. It could be. One time we asked Prabhupada, what if there's a nuclear war and we know there's a missile coming to Los Angeles, here in our community? What do we do? Do you remember the answer? Go into the temple, begin kirtan, and you'll finish the kirtan of Vaikuntha. So, Sananta, you suggested that towards the end. I asked if there's any questions, but also, does anyone else have Prabhupada stories? This is a Prabhupada memorial. Anybody have other stories?
Any questions for Svarup? Any comments?
Yes,
or?
Oh, well, okay, yeah. Basically, we spoke to Srila Prabhupada about her future, and I started talking about how Prabhupada eulogized, talked about Srilam. But Prabhupada also told my sister, he said there's a word called adakajani, means no union. So if there's no child of the marriage, then you can get remarried. But if there's a child born of the marriage, then you should remain widow. And she did. She followed that instruction into her late 60s. And she finally did get remarried to a very nice man. But she raised her, and Prabhupada said, so your brother, he is a devotee, and I lived right next door to her. He said, he can take care of you? And I told Prabhupada, I said, yes, Prabhupada, you can count on me. I'll take care of her. And then he said, so your daughter, how old is she? He said, 2.5. He said, give all your love to your daughter. He said, and then he said to her, what guarantee do you have that if you get another marriage, that the same thing won't happen? He said, Prabhupada said to her, can you get a guarantee? My sister said, no. He said, I'll tell you what. If somebody wants to marry you, I want him to put the guarantee in writing. Give it to your brother, and your brother will give it to me. I want that guarantee in writing. But Prabhupada told her, just give all your love to your daughter, bring her up, send her to Gurukula, and remain widow. And my sister did follow those instructions. So that was basically the sum and substance of that discussion.
Very
Thank
nice.
you
Any
for
other
asking
questions for Svarup? Comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's take it on the mic so the people on the internet across the world can hear the question.
Well, since two siblings were devotees, did your parents ever meet Prabhupada, or what did they think of, or what did they
Okay,
discuss?
so my father died when I was very young. I was 10 years old when my father died, so it was just my mother. And she was, first I dropped out of high school. I was 17, dropped out of high school. And then my sister dropped out of college and joined. So she was, and that was it. It was just us two. So her only two children. She had gotten remarried, and she was devastated. It was just. But eventually, she came around, and she did meet Prabhupada. She came here to L.A. She met Srila Prabhupada briefly. Prabhupada was taking a tour of the community right out here on Watsika. She introduced herself. She said, "I'm the mother of Svarupa and Manmohini." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, very nice. And how are you?" And they exchanged a few words. My mother lived in Florida at the time, and she would always go to the Miami airport where devotees were distributing and say, "You know who I am? I'm the mother of Svarupa and Manmohini." And of course, as we were having children, she became a grandmother, and that melted her heart. So she went from being very unfavorable to being very favorable. And yes, she did meet Srila Prabhupada.
Haribol. Any ladies have any questions? Raise your hand.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You said in Krishna book make devotees. What about nectar devotion and teaching Lord Chaitanya?
Yes, nectar devotion. Nectar devotion. One of my closest friends, he left his body some years ago, Sri Srava. The first book he ever read was Nectar Devotion, and he did become a devotee. But, Nectar Devotion is a pretty heavy book. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of rules, regulations. And so I said, I'm surprised that Nectar Devotion would attract people to the movement. I would think people would leave after, after reading Nectar Devotion. But yeah, letters would come in from people, but so many people, I read Krishna, I read Bhagavad Gita, so many people were George Harrison fans. I love George Harrison, and he's into Krishna. Please tell me about Krishna consciousness. That mail order business, being the secretary of ISKCON was I loved it. Every morning I'd go to the post office, I'd get the mail sack, go through the mail, a lot of orders for books and beads and paraphernalia, and a lot of questions, a lot of people. So I established a mail order membership program. So I invited these people to donate every month a certain amount of money, and I put out a newsletter, Bhakti Rasa, I called it, every 2 weeks, where I put a picture of Prabhupada and some inspirational quote. What's nice is, when I got onto Facebook years ago, I said, wow, that's what I'm going to do with this Facebook thing. I'll find pictures of Prabhupada, quotes, little nuggets, and just what I was doing back in the 70s. So, this is perfect for me. And I've been doing that. And it's been nice. I think some of you may have seen my posts on Facebook. I do every day I try to get something posted. So yeah, people were coming from all the books, but especially Krishna book, Gita, not so much Nectar Devotion, Sri Upanishad.
Very good. So why don't we have 5 more minutes.
Acha.
Tell me what quality of Prabhupada is the most meaningful to you.
Before I do that,
Okay.
I was thinking, someone mentioned, I think on one of the videos, about signs. I'm not sure where it was, but Prabhupada had this thing about reading signs. And I remember in Cheviot Hills, he saw a sign on the tennis courts, said, please remove your shoes. Oh no, I remember when they were talking about the pedals at the airport. Prabhupada said they don't mind the cigarette butts. So he said, but the rose petals they mind. So he read the sign, please remove your shoes before entering the court. He said they take their shoes off to play this game, but they wear their dirty, filthy shoes in their homes. And then there's Then the Commonwealth Pier in Boston, where the first thing Prabhupada saw when he arrived in America. And when he went back there on the morning walk with devotees, he pointed to this 100-foot sign that said unalloyed steel. He said, they have unalloyed steel, we have unalloyed devotion. And another thing, Prabhupada would go fly so much back and forth. He noticed that when he fly into the LA airport, he'd see signs that said, go to New York, go to New York, New York is wonderful. And in New York, there were signs saying, go to LA, go to LA, go take a flight to LA, LA is wonderful. So he made some comment about that. So you ask about...
Prabhupada has
one other
26
sign, I'm
okay,
sorry, one
go
other
ahead.
sign. Cool cigarettes. He said, cool cigarettes, they're breathing in fire and they're calling it cool. How is this... I'm sorry you interrupted.
That's okay. These are nuggets. Go ahead. Give
So-
us more. Mining nuggets.
I'm sorry? American Express. Right. So what quality?
Yeah, Prabhupada is the perfect gentleman. He's the Vaishnava, has all 26 qualities. For you, what was the most meaningful that keeps you his disciple?
Prabhupada's kindness, his compassion, his purity. There was no motivation. You know, when you meet someone in the material world, like, what does he want from me? It's the plane of exploitation, manipulation. Prabhupada, all he wanted to do is give us love of God. And it emanated from him. He said, I'm not a businessman. I didn't come here to take anything. And it was so obvious. So, you know, Prabhupada, it's just that purity, that all he wanted to do was deliver us. Here's a quick story. Upendra told me this. So when the devotees first went to India, one of the things Prabhupada asked them to do was clean out his rooms at Radha Damodar, straighten them up, you know, get them together, because when he had left Radha Damodar, this was the first time back, when he took that first wave of devotees back to India. So in cleaning up the room at Radha Damodar, somebody found like a piece of paper, like a to-do list, we call it. It said, save the world from godlessness. You know, I think to myself, my to-do list says, you know, I write down, do laundry, change the oil in the car. Prabhupada's to-do list, save the world from godlessness. So Prabhupada came to save us from godlessness, from a miserable, dark life of hopelessness, and that's the way I saw Prabhupada.
Perfect.
Just pure.
Fantastic. Let's give him a big round of applause. Fantastic.
Hare Krishna.
Great sharing.
Thank
Beautiful
you for letting
stories.
me speak.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming. Swarup Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Now, does somebody know how to work the lights in the temple room? Who here knows how to work the light switches? Click the button. Well, you're doing the video. Okay. So thank you again, Prabhu. That was really nice. So now we're going to have 30 minutes of news stories that I've recorded over the last couple of years during the COVID period. And again, it's going to go male, female, so everyone has equal chance to give us stories about Prabhupada. Don't want to discriminate. So listen to the lesson and the quality that's given to us by these devotees.
Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
I had a question in my mind about sickness and how we become sick. Do we become sick from karma? Do we become sick from our minds? Do we become sick from uncleanliness? How does sickness come upon us? And I hadn't been able to form it into a question, a question that I could actually ask Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada and I were walking along the big main street, and there's a church there called Christuskirche. And so we were walking along, and I was thinking about this while I was taking the walk with Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada stopped. And he turned to me and he said, 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. And then off we went on our walk, continuing. So that's just something which I always remember. And in other classes that Srila Prabhupada has given, he's mentioned something about the effect of the mind on the body and the body on the mind. So the position of the mind we have to be very careful of, because it will affect the body. So at that time, Prabhupada explained to me that 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. But another thing that's very instructive is that Srila Prabhupada actually read my mind. He knew what I was thinking about. And I didn't even ask the question. And he answered it right there. So that was very instructive to me, that spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, he read my mind. He knew what I was thinking about.
I actually used to hear many classes that we're always talking about, because Madhavisa really liked telling us about how even if we were a blade of grass, that we'd be eternally happy. And I was so despondent by that. I tried to keep very upbeat, but I was very despondent by that, thinking, wow, here I am in a human body, and I'm going to be stuck as a blade of grass for the rest of eternity. Yeah, not sure about that one. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada came to to Melbourne a couple of times when I was, after I joined. And in 1975, early in the year in 1975, he was actually giving different lectures, but because I joined when I had a little baby while I was pregnant, and my little baby Damodar was only young, around 2 years old when I was going to the temple, living in the temple. I didn't get to many darshans, and I didn't get to as many classes because I had a child, or I had to sit right at the back and run out if there was any noise. But on this particular occasion in Melbourne, the mothers were sharing the minding of the children, and Prabhupada was giving the class. And I was sitting at the back, just in case I had to run out, and Prabhupada was asked a question at the end of the lecture related to being what is our eternal form and the spiritual one. And Prabhupada said, and it felt like he looked straight at me at the back, seriously, it felt like he looked straight at me and said, in the spiritual world, everyone has human form. But if you want to be a flower for Krishna, you can be a flower. And I felt so relieved. I just thought, oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhupada.
Part of our thing was the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. And for that, we were really talking about being part of the government. You know? And I said to Prabhupada that you really envision a time when devotees will run countries and command armies. And he said yes. And because he had been talking about this, eventually a war between the devotees and the demons. He had said, and I'm going back a little bit, the same conversation, he said, therefore there should be a war. He said, these wars where the demons fight the demons doesn't accomplish anything, because whoever wins is a demon. But he said, if you have a war and one side is devotees and the other side is demon, then that's Krishna consciousness. And so he was really talking about, you know, when we had the In God We Trust Party, he was thinking about what government does. And government is the rule of law, and you know. So I had already been scared by some devotees. So I had a doubt. And so I was able to ask him, you envision time when devotees will run countries and command armies? And he said, yes. So I said, then how in that circumstances can we be sure that we won't become demons? He said, chant 16 rounds a day, and follow the 4 regulative principles. And I said, and that's enough? And he said, yes, that's enough.
In Detroit, we were very fortunate that we were able to edit Srila Prabhupada's books. And I wrote Srila Prabhupada when I became pregnant with my son. And he wrote me such a kind letter back. And he said, I told him how I was going on Sankirtan full time. And he wrote me back. And he said, in the advanced stages of pregnancy, you should not travel by train or plane, and you should refrain from going on Sankirtan. And we would go for 8 hours a day in Detroit. And so I began editing Krishna book and also preparing prasadam for the devotees when they would return. And at that time also, I was working on children's version of Sri Upanishad. And I sent Srila Prabhupada the first chapter. And he wrote me back and he said, for children, it must be very easily understood. He said, for example, how can they understand this term Brahmajyoti, which I had included? He said, you must say, instead of Brahmajyoti, you must say, just as there is sun, there is shine coming from the sun, so there is another shine coming from Krishna's body. That is Brahmajyoti. So he said, do this work very nicely.
We had invited some theology professors from the University of Frankfurt to see Prabhupada. So they came, professors, learned men, and Catholic theology, I think. So then Srila Prabhupada just began to preach to them about the very basic, the Aham Brahmasmi part, that you are not this body. There's spirit, soul, and this and that. So they listened for some time. And then at one point, one of the professors, he said, Swami, can we speak about some higher, spiritual principles like that? And then Prabhupada just said, so unless you understand the basics, what's the use of speaking of some higher spiritual? So he didn't care, to maybe cater to there and make a nice conversational impression. He would just tell them, and obviously you don't even understand what I've been explaining in the bodily concept of life, that there's a difference between the soul and the body, and you want to speak of some higher spiritual principles, which I think is an important instruction for all of us, for everybody. Sometimes devotees, they go or start to read certain things which are actually beyond their level of understanding. So you first do the basics. When you understand the basics, then you go to the next class. Not some student of mathematics who is already, or he just is learning that 2 and 2 is 4. Now he wants to understand algebra or some higher mathematics principles. No, you first do your studies of it. Then naturally you will come to the next level. So he was, and yeah, he was like that. He was could be quite strong on that.
So Prabhupada was very merciful. I remember that when I was at the lecture in which I was going to get initiated, we were very fatigued. We worked very hard. We ate a lot of prasadam. It was hard to focus sometimes, and I felt like I wasn't connecting properly, and I couldn't hear him. And so I called his name in the middle of the lecture. Prabhupada. And people were looking at me, but Prabhupada also looked at me, and he wasn't upset. He just heard someone calling his name, and he turned to look at me, and I became peaceful because I knew he wasn't upset, and I was embarrassed, but I was desperate. And so at that moment, Prabhupada just stopped, looked at me for a second, calmed me down, and just kept speaking. I don't know what the other, I remember my temple person asked me later, what was that all about? I didn't answer. Because I didn't really know either. All I know was that I was so frustrated and Prabhupada was so merciful. He didn't get angry that I disturbed his lecture. He felt my anxiety that I really wanted to hear him. So that's very merciful. He could pick up on the heart, huh?
While Prabhupada was staying in Juhu, of course, every morning he would go for his walk. Sometimes he would take a little ride, but usually he would just go right to the beach. It was a block away. So every day you could set your watch by Prabhupada, you know, for the morning walk, the sunrise. So he'd come down the stairs, and of course he gets out the door, there's 20, 30 devotees there, which is a lot. You know, they're all living there in Juhu. And everyone's offering obeisances down on the ground. But there was a young boy, and he was standing like this, just had his hands folded. And Prabhupada just kept walking, and he looked at me. He said, this is the beginning of his fall down. Just like that, at one item. And then he just walked on. So that's why I say it was always very important to never lose that focus of who you were dealing with. Because it was easy, you know, it wasn't a difficult thing. And of course, you know, when you were with him, you would get to see it with yourself, and you could see it with others. And he would do his best to cure it. You know, Prabhupada would, so many times he called us into the room, tell us to, you know, wake up, stop sleeping. Yeah, he could have just ignored all of it, but he knew he had to keep us focused, especially being with him.
And one time I got to go to one of those darshans. It was with two priests. And one was an older priest, and I remember him being a very important person, maybe in the Archdiocese of Detroit. There's a lot of Catholics in Detroit. And then the other one was a younger priest, and I thought maybe it was his assistant or just a junior person, but still he was also a priest. And, you know, they, out of politeness and interest, maybe they came to meet Prabhupada, and it was an interesting experience listening to Prabhupada exchange with them, because I could start to see how muddled their thinking was, especially the older priest. Like, he was talking in circles and not really saying much about his kind of understanding of God. And Prabhupada was speaking quite simply and clearly and trying to get it through. And at one point, it came out, well, I think Prabhupada used the word foolish. Like, you know, foolish men who don't understand God, we will not be able to, you know, put them in the top levels. And the priest, I think he misunderstood and thought the word foolish might have meant mentally deficient or something. And so in a sense, not understanding who you are in relation to God is a mental deficiency, but they had a little, so the priest got very defensive in a way, and he started saying, no, we work with the poor and the mentally handicapped, and he kept saying the word handicapped, and finally Prabhupada said, handicapped is handicapped. That's another matter. That's not what I'm talking about here. But the priest couldn't, like, he was in a loop and he couldn't let it go. And Prabhupada started to say, if I cut off my hand, can you fix my hand? Can you do anything about it? And the priest was like, well, no. Well, that's what I'm telling you. Handicapped is a different thing. We'll discuss that later. But now we want to bring people to the level of God consciousness. And then he started to say how you can't really get there if you're eating meat, if you're killing animals. And I sat there listening to all of it, and I thought, I have this realization, like, I actually know more than these guys. And that was a big thing. I was a young girl, and I have a respect for elders, and I realized that they really didn't know that much. And it became really apparent the way Prabhupada interacted with them. And he wasn't demeaning them at all, but it was frustrating that they could not understand. The younger priest was a little bit better at understanding, actually. He sort of got it more. And in fact, he really, by the end, he was very enamored of Prabhupada. And I think I read in Hari Sari's diary maybe that somebody said to Prabhupada after they had left something like that younger priest, he was ready to become your disciple. And Prabhupada said, yes, if you speak the truth, they will become your disciples. So that was pretty fabulous, that whole experience for me, hearing Prabhupada speak to other religious person like that. Because I think most of us who became devotees then had had the experience that whatever religious path we had been raised in was not answering the questions for us. I think that was a kind of a universal theme of the 60s and 70s anyway. So there it was, like in real life, in real time.
Oh, another time in Los Angeles, the first time they played the Govinda prayers. First time in the history of ISKCON, I was there. And as Prabhupada entered the temple room, Vishnu John turned on the Govinda tape. And I used to always try and be behind Prabhupada's lotus feet so I could try and put my head at his lotus feet as he was offering his obeisances to each deity, you know, to Gaur Nitai, to Radha Rukmini, to Radha Krishna, and to Lord Jagannath. And then he'd go sit at the Vyasasan. So that day, I'll just never forget, because when he sat on the Vyasasan, he was feeling such ecstasy. And tears were like shooting from his eyes. And those of us who were sitting near at the bottom of the Vyasa, we were getting showered by Prabhupada's tears.
Literally.
Literally showered. You could feel his tears, the shooting.
And Prabhupada would send us out on Vrajmandal Parikrama, but he himself wasn't going in those days. He went, I think it was 71 was when he went with the first devotees. I think it was 71. But by 75, he himself wasn't going. But I don't know if it was 75 or 76. We had gone out. Of course, there were ladies' buses and men's buses. And the ladies' bus had gotten broken down. And we were waiting in some Durga temple somewhere. And of course, they just left us. It was getting really late. I don't know how, it was dark. It was really late. Finally, Prabhupada missed us. And he sent some people out to get us. He was always caring for us. Yes.
One time, I got a little bit of donations, because we were really poor grihastas in those days, really poor. So $10 here, $10 there, and I bought a pair of golden yellowish rocking chair, a set of rocking chair cushions. One that goes on the seat, one that goes on the back. Because Prabhupada had these cushions that were like foam rubber, like, I don't know, ½ an inch thick. And they were made nicely. They were covered with a blue cloth. But they were so thin. It was so thin. It gave no cushioning effect whatsoever. So I went and got these cushions, I think at J.C. Penney's at the mall. And gave them to, I think it was Nanda Kumar at that point. Gave them to Nanda Kumar and said, Nanda Kumar, can you please slip these on? You know, sneak them onto Prabhupada's chair. So one morning when I met Prabhupada at, it was, I forget what it was called. The name of the bluffs, Santa Monica Bluffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. That Hridayananda Maharaj found that place for us to go, because there was too much sand, too much of a beach for Prabhupada to walk. So he found this place, and Prabhupada said, this is the best place in Los Angeles for walking. So when I got to the car and I opened the door, and Prabhupada swung his legs out and looked up at me, and he said, so the rolling rock covers you have supplied? Prabhupada called it a rolling rock, which was, never heard that before. And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, some of us donated to buy them. He said, thank you very much. And one thing that I noticed, I mean, wherever in the world I happened to be, by His grace, to be in the association of Srila Prabhupada, he always said thank you. He always said thank you very much. No matter the most seemingly insignificant, little, minute thing that you did for him, he always said thank you very much. I don't know one thing, and I'm talking about dozens and dozens of situations. I don't know one time the Prabhupada did not say thank you to me. I mean, kid from New Jersey, you know, and Prabhupada, every single thing, everything, in letters and in person, every little thing he said. I mean, one time we gave Prabhupada a $108 check, and he wrote, "Thank you very much for your gift." I mean, it's $108. It's like offering a drop of water to the ocean. And he said, "Thank you very much." So it was never, to me it seemed, it was never a burden. It was never too much. You were never imposing on Prabhupada and, you know, forcing him to say thank you. He said it, what do you say, genuinely? I mean, it was amazing to me that he always said thank you. And most of the time, thank you very much.
One time I was supposed to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and my son Arjuna was, how old, maybe 4 or 5 months old at the most. And so this was the second visit after I was pregnant. So yeah, so he was little, and I was holding him, and I was supposed to go in to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and my son dirtied his diaper, so I couldn't go in, you know. And so I was holding him, and he started crying, you know, my son started crying, and Prabhupada walked by, and he said, just like the child is only happy in the arms of the mother, similarly, we are only happy when we're in the arms of Lord Krishna. So kind.
So on one occasion, we were just returning from the morning walk. We were nearing the temple. Dr. Patel was walking and having animated conversations with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was saying something critical about one of the well-known, you know, figures of the recent history. And Prabhupada was quite critical. And Dr. Patel, as he had done many times, really objected strongly to Srila Prabhupada's criticism. And he was asking Prabhupada, why do you have to criticize? Let them be. You do your thing, let them do their thing. Just leave them alone. Why do you have to criticize them? They are great souls in their own right. So let them just be. If you don't agree with their philosophy, just let them alone. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped. And Prabhupada said that if I'm in an operating room and I'm conducting a operation with a patient, and someone comes into the room and starts cutting my patient, am I going to just stand there and watch it happen? No. I'm going to say, get out! Prabhupada said loudly, get out, you rascal! So I cannot be silent. These rascals and fools have destroyed the culture of India. And therefore I must speak out. And I will speak out. Prabhupada is very, very strong.
The young men, even in those days, 1966, 67, 68, they were saying women shouldn't give classes because they're less intelligent. So Govindadasi happened to have been one of Prabhupada's personal servants at that time, she and her husband Gursundar. So I asked her to ask Prabhupada for me, is it true that women can't advance as quickly as men? And I was feeling depressed. So Prabhupada told her to tell me, yes, if you think you're a woman, how can you make any advancement? And when one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada that I shouldn't be giving classes because we were all equal, and many girls were giving classes in those days, Kanchan Bala, Leela Sukha, myself. And so one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada and said, this is not right. So Prabhupada said, he quoted the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya said, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, Sudra Keninai, whether one is a sannyasi or a brahmana or anything, if he knows the science of Krishna, then he can be a teacher of Krishna consciousness. And even if you think that women are less intelligent, still everyone should be given a chance to speak.
The quality of that Prabhupada exhibited that impressed me most readily was his compassion, his compassionate nature. I saw how he would look at compassionately to how he dealt with some of his disciples who had strayed, fallen away, and they come back, and he would receive them with love and compassion. We had never seen that. In fact, just to illustrate, I remember one little incident. I had gone to San Francisco from New Dwarka. It was the first Rath Yatra I had been to, the first real Rath Yatra. Because in New York, they used to have a little mini festival in Central Park. But when I came to New Dwarka, they weren't having Rath Yatras in LA. But San Francisco would have the big Rath Yatra, Golden Gate Park, and the whole community would go down to San Francisco in caravan, and bus, and cars, and everything. And we got there the day before Rath Yatra, and that evening, Prabhupada was coming into San Francisco airport. And a bunch of devotees went to the airport to greet him. As I said, Prabhupada coming into an airport, that meant a festival. There'd be kirtan, everything. And I was there. At that time, I wasn't leading the kirtan. I don't know who was, somebody else was. But there were sannyasis, Vishnu Jan Maharaj was there. There were many people who were there. And as Prabhupada was making his way through the crowd, through the aisle, suddenly he stopped. And he looked to his right, he looked across the room, in the airport. He looked across, and I was on his left side, and I tried to follow his gaze, wonder, what's he looking at? And I traced it, and he was looking at one young man. I didn't realize that that young man was a devotee, was a disciple of Prabhupada. He was a young man with hair, and he had come out. He had heard from the other devotees, Prabhupada's going to be able, and he came to see him. Prabhupada stopped and looked at him, and he just stopped walking. And his look was just eyes of compassion and love. And he stretched out his hand, and he said, he did like this, motioning for him to come. And that boy came, and he walked through the line, and Prabhupada took off one of his garlands. He had many. He put it around him. The exchange was one of love. It was so real, Prabhupada had affection. And this boy had left maybe years before. But Prabhupada was so happy to see him. He gave him the garland, and then he continued walking. So that was a little thing, but seeing that compassion and that affection in action, that was touching, So that's something he always, we read that the Vaishnavas are full of compassion. He doesn't even want to see, he doesn't want to see an animal being hurt or killed. What to speak of a devotee or a disciple. He was so compassionate.
So in one of the lectures I was in at Honolulu, Srila Prabhupada was speaking, and he must have been speaking about pride and how it's not a good thing for people to be proud. But then he said, but to be proud of being the most confidential servitor of Krishna, that is spiritual. And I thought, did he really say that? And then he said it again. So, you see him in his pictures sometimes with his head so high, holding his cane, and that's why. Because he feels himself the most confidential servitor of Krishna.
Then Pushta Krishna asked Prabhupada, will we recognize you in the spiritual world when we arrive? And he said, yes, you will recognize me. He had previously said, and we will have big ISKCON in the spiritual world. He said, that is my role, that when you return back home, back to Godhead, the spiritual master will take your hand and put your hand in Krishna's hand and make the introduction. So that's an eternal position that he has. We are eternally related to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we have one more 15-minute podcast with Shruti Rupa Devidasi. Before we put that on, maybe we can all just stand up and just stretch a little bit, get some of the muscles and bones creaking, and maybe we can just chant one round together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. So now let's have Shruti Rupa, and okay, we can all sit down now. And when we're seated, then we can have this 15-minute podcast with Shruti Rupa and her realizations about Prabhupada. And then after that, we will have Bhardraj again. If you're outside, Bhardraj, get ready. We'll have Bhajan. And then the RT at 4:30. And I think Clyde, is Clyde going to be leading the RT at 4:30? Great, so. Okay, and then I've just been made aware that at 5 o'clock, don't go away, there'll be an Abhishek for Srila Prabhupada from 5 to 5:30, and then Bhargava will have his video slideshow. And then again, just a reminder, at 6:10, Bhardraj Prabhu will lead us in the Pushpanjali to Srila Prabhupada. So if we can settle down and listen to Shruti Rupa, it's a 15-minute, short little interview.
So one day, when I was cleaning, went up to his upstairs, and when I'd mop the floor, I'd leave the fan on so I could dry it. And so that day, Prabhupada went up to the room earlier than usual, and he came back down the stairs. So he went up, he saw something wrong, he came back down, he saw me somewhere there in his house, and he just motioned to come. So to go upstairs, you had to kind of go out on his veranda and up these stairs. So we went up, and he opened the door to his bedroom, and he said, "Fan is on? No one is here? Who is wasting Krishna's energy?" I mean, it was obviously me. He knew that I had done that. But again, it was, and of course, I didn't say a word, but I filed that. I put that in that place where something Prabhupada said. And there was no more to be said. He didn't say any more, but he made it very clear. He said, fan is on, no one is here. Who is wasting Krishna's energy? Because Prabhupada saw everything as Krishna. Everything, Krishna was in everything and everywhere. So for me, it was a fan, it was a turn of a switch, but he saw that it was a waste. And Prabhupada didn't like waste. Once he came into his kitchen in Vrindavan, it was in 76, because we weren't getting a dish, a preparation, he said, tomorrow I'll come in and show you. So when he came in, he'd just come in after his massage. He had his gumsha on. He was, just glistening. When he stepped into this small kitchen, it was like all the oxygen had left, and he just permeated the scent of sandalwood. And I mean, his head was massaged with sandalwood and the body with mustard oil. But when he stepped into the kitchen, he bent down because it was low, and with a smile, as he would, in a very childlike manner, he said, I've never been in my kitchen before. He said, it is very nice. It was very sweet voice. And then he walked in and he looked, I was sitting there cutting the vegetables. I had a bucket and I had taken the cauliflower that we were going to use, and I had taken the core and twisted it off and had the leaves. And Prabhupada immediately looked and said, why are you throwing this away? I didn't say anything. Honestly, there was a lesson, because previously I was somewhere with him when he was questioning another lady on something she was doing, and he asked her, this, and she immediately began to give it a defense, and she was telling why. And Prabhupada was just standing there staring, and he said, you've become very expert at defending yourself. He made a note of that. And so, but it was my tendency anyway, when he sat, like when he said, who is here, fan is who, why you throwing this away? I didn't say a word. It was obvious, I was wasting. I didn't, right. So I didn't say anything. So he said that, and then when I compared notes with Jamuna once on about the wasting, she said she had an incident where they were using matches for something, and she was striking it, and Indian matches are like, they're just impossible. They're either too wet, or the little bit of the igniting part snaps off and it doesn't light, or the side scratched it off and strike. So it's impossible. So she had strike, and then she said, Prabhupada actually just grabbed the box from her. And he looked at her, and she said, with one strike, said he took his hand, and with one strike, it lit, and then it cupped his hand at the same time, and he lit the whole thing, whatever it was they were doing. And he looked at her, and he said, a devotee should become expert in knowing how to use things properly and avoid waste. So that was another thing, Prabhupada was expert. And whatever, from the simplest thing of lighting a match, just to be conscious and focus. That's what Krishna consciousness is. We're also restless, in the West and so many things, but Prabhupada was always conscious in that moment, whether it was the details or the principle, and that's what he was trying to convey. He said, just, become expert in doing and avoid waste. So there again, that was another principle. Details are who he tells to each person a different story or a different instruction. Those are the details and meant for, one or the other. But the principle is Prabhupada was very strict about wasting anything, whether it was time, money, food, prasadam, energy, anything. And
right. It's a great lesson that we can all use and apply in our own lives, certainly. It's a great principle to just focus on that alone.
I mean, honestly, I have that voice in my head. I'm kind of obsessive. If I walk out of the room, I feel guilty. I turn around and know I've left the fan on. I go back in. You know, if I walk out and the light's on, you know, I can hear that voice and I turn it off. But, you know, hopefully one day I'll understand the real impact of it besides Prabhupada's voice and him saying that seeing Krishna everywhere and seeing Krishna in everything. And not wanting to waste anything and utilize everything in the service. That's where he's trying to get us to go.
Very good. Take us to another time and place, another lesson or any quality that was exhibited for you.
I think I'll tell you about Prabhupada's sense of humor.
Okay, great.
There's a wonderful, wonderful story about a morning walk in Mayapur. And at this time, so this was early 77, Prabhupada started getting sick around December. He was seeing an Ayurvedic doctor in Bombay before we went to Kumbh Mela and before we went to Varda. He was starting to not allowed to eat salt or ghee. And so he was just starting to get sick, and this went on, it built through early 77 till obviously it got worse and worse as the summer went on, and we went on to London and he came back. But we were on this morning walk, or he was going on a morning walk, and it was the tour of the new long building. And I was up on the veranda there with the ladies, you know, when Prabhupada would come down and the devotees would follow, and then the little Bengali boys would sing, and Prabhupada would go on his walk, and then when he come back, they'd be there at the stairs singing, just beautiful, beautiful, sweet voices. And so I was with the ladies, and I'm like, I want to go on the morning walk. Why are we going on the morning walk? And they were like, women, the ladies are not allowed to go. And I'm like, why? And it was just we're not allowed. And I'm like, well, that's not, you know, I want to go. So they were laughing because they knew me. And I'm like, Vishaka goes on the morning walks when she's around. You know, she's not here. I'm going to go get my camera. I'm going to go get my camera and I'm going to be Vishaka for the day. You know, I'm like, and if the pictures come out, I'll send them to BTG. I mean, who can argue? You know? And they're just like shaking their head. But, you know, that was Shrudupa. So I got my camera and I ran over there and I was out of breath, you know, huffing and puffing and, you know, a little stressed out about, okay, what I was supposed to do, not supposed to do. And when I got to where they were in that long building, and I literally actually physically I turned and bumped into one of the sannyasis that were in charge, and I kind of shrunk. I was like, oh no. And looked at me with these daggering eyes, and then this other sannyasi looked at me with these daggering eyes, and I'm like, and so then I just started spinning in my head, getting mental, and within you know, a minute, somehow or other, Prabhupada got a glimpse of me. And Prabhupada started to say something. He was probably 20 feet away from where I was, started to say something, and there must have been maybe 20 men, you know, there, I don't know, but at least 20, and they opened up. It was like the sea parted, and so Prabhupada could see me, and he asked me a question. At that moment, I don't remember, because I was still spinning with this stress. I felt like I'd walked into this wall and just slammed into it, and was feeling like the unwanted, you know, stepchild or something. But at any rate, Prabhupada said something to me, and then he turned and continued to walk, and then, you know, all the men, they closed. And I was standing there mentally wondering what to do. And all I could see down this row were all these saffron and all these sticks, you know, all these dundas that were this long row following Prabhupada, you know, up and down. And I was kind of here, you know, trying to figure this out. And then all of a sudden Prabhupada stopped and he turned, so they opened again. And I got right up to him, and he said, I hear you've built one very nice house at the Goshala. And I know my brain was on fire that morning, and I just said, it will be Srila Prabhupada if you come. And he got this Cheshire grin on his face. He smiled, and then he started to engage me in this conversation. But I was still mentally feeling this unwantedness and this stress that I wasn't really hearing what Prabhupada was saying. And he could tell I wasn't getting it. And he leaned in and he said, you know, 1 CL Bajuria? And I'm just shaking my head no. And he said another time, you don't know? And I went, he said, then he got a little annoyed, you know, stronger in his voice, says, you do not know 1 CL Bajuria? And then I just was like, woke up and was like, oh yes, Srila Prabhupada. Because I was living with CL Bajuria, who was a life member in Calcutta, and I was living out at his place instead of in the Calcutta temple at that time. And I had brought Prabhupada there as a guest to meet CL and his family. And we had a whole thing. I have pictures of sitting on the veranda of Prabhupada speaking, and then they were giving Prabhupada in silver glasses, you know, fresh squeezed pomegranate juice. They gave it to all of us, and so on, so on. So it was a very nice, you know, exchange we had there with this life member. But he was asking me about CL Bajuria, and I'm sitting there, you know, completely dumbfounded because I was so mental. And so he said, and then when I said, oh yes, Srila Prabhupada, he said, you know, he said, I stayed 1 minute and he gave 5,000 rupees. And then 5,000, it was a different story. We were 8 rupees to the dollar, then we were totally different, 7 rupees to a dollar, whatever. And I just immediately responded. I leaned into Srila Prabhupada and I said, Srila Prabhupada, if you come for 2 minutes, I will give you 10,000 rupees. And Prabhupada threw his head back and just laughed and laughed. And he said, so you arrange, I will come. I just remember seeing, you know, some of the sannyasis behind Prabhupada. I saw Satsrup's face, and his face just went like aghast. He just couldn't believe this woman saying this. He was aghast. I just remember this face looking at me. And so the Prabhupada said, so you arrange, I will come. And then Prabhupada turned and started to walk, and then everybody, you know, kind of closed me off, and they went on, and I stood there just like completely mental, and then I left. I left.
Can you share with me just briefly the quality that stood out for you? Prabhupada was a perfect gentleman. He had all 26 qualities in full, but what was the most meaningful one that you've taken into your heart that has lasted you all these years and you're still a disciple and devotee of Prabhupada?
I think it was Prabhupada as a person. It was those qualities that he exhibited as, you know, I mean, some will know him as the author, founder Acharya, you know, but if we study Prabhupada's person and the perfect gentleman and the qualities that he showed in all his interactions, I mean, that's what melted our hearts. That's what charmed us. That's what made us fall in love. Prabhupada made us, you know, devotees, this next generation say, what is it? How did you gave up everything? And I'm thinking, we didn't feel like we gave up everything. It never felt like that. We fell in love. We fell in love. That's who Prabhupada was. It was him as a person who, you know, why everybody walked away from what we walked away from and was ready to jump off the train if that's what was required to serve Prabhupada.
Great, beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time with us on this glorious day to meditate on Prabhupada, as we need to do every day. But this 30th anniversary is a glorious time to come together again. So thank you for allowing us to hear your stories.
Thank you for allowing me to give what I've been given. Thank you.
Haribo, Shri Rupa Devidasi Ki Jai. So sorry about the technical difficulty, but at least sound vibration, we appreciate the hearing. So now, and hopefully we'll get this repaired for our 5:30 presentation by Bhargava, his video slideshow. But in the meantime, now we will hear from Bhardaraj Prabhu. Yes? Harmonium, what are you going to play? Okay. Do you want to do it from the asana? Why don't you do it from the asana? I don't know if there's a harmonium high enough for that. Use a temple harmonium? Hmm?
Here, I'll use this one.
No. Do you know how to turn the lights on?
I don't know if that's going to work. You think that's going to work? Maybe. Oh yeah, that'll probably work. I don't know who Thank you. Yeah, I think that's okay. Thank you.
So is this a sing-along?
I don't know. Gopal Krishna was going to drum for me, but he's not here.
Do we have a drummer in the house? Mridanga player?
Okay, no drum.
No drum. What?
Gopal Krishna?
Gopal Krishna, are you there outside? Come on down. Huh? Okay.
All right. It's not absolutely necessary. It's not absolutely necessary. When he comes. Whoa. Suddenly it's not playing.
Not getting air.
Can't seem to.
First button.
Huh? First one?
Yes. That's
Where
to
does
be
that
out,
sound?
And then 3 and 5. I don't know. It's getting tweaked. You can do that if you don't want it so loud.
There's a
Yeah,
stuck.
There's a buzz. Oh no.
Is it? It's probably.
Do you want me to get the other harmonium out there? Maybe. This is giving it more sound though.
Oh, he's not here.
Try and see if that works.
Yeah,
it's
there's,
got a buzz. Something
we've got a stuck key. Can this come up?
Keep it Jaya. Keep it Jaya. Can you accompany Bhardaraj on the mridanga?
This is the wrong way round, so it's got stuff.
Right here.
Right next
Come
to
on.
him.
The other way round. I can't get this out.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Oh well. I think we'll just do it. Yeah, I know, but we can't get to it. Can you get the temple harmonium? Maybe I can just use that. There's one here, I think. Is that it? Okay.
No scales, but it's really good.
Okay. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyaeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langate girim yat kripa tamaham bande Shri Guru Dinataram. So there was a time when I was called to be by Prabhupada's side in those last days of his sojourn with us in this world. And by fortune, I happened to be able to be there. And that was, Prabhupada was, as I said, in his last days, and no one really knew how much longer he would be with us, so each day was an enormous gift to have his association. And I had the great fortune to be called to sing kirtan in his room a few times, actually a few times a day, almost every day. And one of the first times I had the opportunity when I arrived in Vrindavan. It was very early in the morning, and I came into Prabhupada's bedroom, or his room where he was resting. And it was quite early. I mean, I think it was even before the sun came up. And Hansadutta was there. He had already been singing, I think, before me. And then I came in. And it was so quiet. And Prabhupada was, I could barely even make out his figure in a dim morning light in the room. So it was about, I don't know, but maybe 12 feet away from where I was sitting. There was a harmonium. So I picked up the I kind of picked it up and started playing a few notes, just very quietly. And Upendra Prabhu, who was Prabhupada's servant in at that time, or at least one of them, but in that slot, rushed up to me and said, he said, Prabhupada doesn't want any harmonium. Prabhupada said, no harmonium. So I stopped. And then I saw Prabhupada with his hand motioning to Upendra Prabhu, and he went back there, and Prabhupada said something to him which I could not hear. And then he came back and he said, Prabhupada asked who was playing harmonium. I told him it's Bharadraj. Prabhupada said, oh, he can play. So I did. I'd like to share with you this beautiful bhajan. It was very special to Prabhupada, sung by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, called Bhuliya Tumhare, Sangsare Ashiya. I have forgotten you, O Lord, and I have come to this world. भूलिया तुम्हारे संसारे आशिया हे नानाविध व्यथा भूलिया तुम्हारे संसारे आशिया हे नानाविध व्यथा तुम्हारो चरणे আসিয়াছি আমি বলিব দুঃখের কথা জননী জঠরে ছিলাম যখন বিষামে বন্দন পাশে একবার প্রভু দেখা দিয়া মরে বঞ্চিলে Dinodase তখন ভাবিনু জানামা পাইয়া করিব বাজান তব জানামা পাইয়া জনমা হইল পরিমায় জলে না হইল জ্ঞান লাভ পাইয়া তোমারে সংসারে আসিয়া পেয়ে নান বিধ ব্যথা তোমার চরণে আসিয়াছি আমি বলিব দুঃখের কথা আদরের ছেলে স্বজনের কোলে হাসিয়া রতন কাল জানকা জননী স্নেহতে ভুলিয়া সংসার লাগিল ভালো গ্রামে দিন দিন বালকা হইয়া গেলিনু বালকা সহ আর কিছু দিনে জ্ঞান উপজিল পাঠ পড়ি আহারা বিদ্যার গৌরবে ব্রাহ্মী দেশে দেশে ধানায়ুপাজিল করে বিদ্যার গৌরবে ভ্রমি দেশে দেশে ধানায়ুপাজিল করে স্বজন পলিয়া স্বজন পালন করিয়ে কামনে স্বজন স্বজন পালন করিয়ে কামনে ভুলিন তোমার হরি ভুলিন তোমার হরি স্বজন পালন করিয়ে কামনে ভুলিনু তোমার হরে ভুলিনু তোমার হরি বাদাখে এখনো বারদাখে এখনো Bhakti Vinoda Bhajake Khana Bhakti Vinoda Khandiya Khatarayate Bhajake Khana Bhakti Vinoda Khandiya Katara Amen Navajiya Tare Dinavrita Gela Navajiya Tore Dinavrita Gela Ekona Ki Habe Bhati Buliya Tomare Sansare Ashiya Peyanana Viravyata Tomara Charane Ashiya Chiyami Boliba Dukhera Katha Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Via tomare samsare ashiya. I forsook you, O Lord, and came to this world of pain and sorrow. Now I submit. And now I submit the tale of woe at your lotus feet, the story of my suffering. While still in the unbearable fetters of my mother's womb, I saw you before me. You revealed yourself, but briefly, and then abandoned this poor servant of yours. At that moment, I swore to worship you after taking birth, but birth came, and with it the network of worldly illusion which robbed me of all good sense. As a fondled son on the lap of relatives, I passed my time smiling and laughing. My parents' affection helped me to forget the pangs of birth, and I thought the world was very nice. Day by day I grew and soon began playing with other boys. Shortly my powers of understanding emerged. I read and studied my lessons incessantly. Traveling from place to place, proud of my education, I grew wealthy and maintained my family with undivided attention. O Lord Hari, I forgot you. Now, in old age, Bhakti Vinod is sad. He weeps. I failed to worship you, O Lord, and instead passed my life in vain. What will be my fate now? Hare Krishna.
Jai. Haribo. Thank you, Bhardaraj. Thank you, Bhardaraj.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Clyde, are you in the house to lead Arti? Haribo. So, with a little housekeeping, if everyone can stand up and take your chairs, fold them if possible, and lean them up against the wall on each side.